Hi, this is Junaid. We're going to continue our conversation about Big Ideas 2023. So we did talk about precision therapies in the last lecture, and today we're going to talk about molecular diagnosis. This is an extremely important topic as well, and it's everyone should know, at least my students, when we're talking about digital transformation and how things are changing. Now, clearly, this is a different topic as we go along in terms of digital health in particular. So this is going to be something that I'm going to go fast, but again, these are really important topics for future physicians to understand in terms of how things are going to change, and of course, investment opportunities are being discussed as far as the ARC Invest is concerned, but we are taking it as more of an educational document as far as our concern is going through this particular whole document. So molecular, and then the term over here is cancer diagnosis. So they're going to mainly concentrate on the cancer diagnosis portion, and the next generation sequence, cost of collapse, and that's quite no, it's amazing like how much the cost has collapsed, and we talked about it in earlier lectures, and the clinical utility accumulates is going to be around 95 billion, and then around 2030 we're looking at around 24 billion opportunity. And by, if this continues to be expanded, and if the testing is going to be really something that's going to be worth it in clinical opportunity, we're looking at a massive cost difference of up to 145 billion dollars. One of the key things that we're looking at as far as the public health is concerned, we have gotten mainly a big control over the cardiovascular problem, right? We've got stenting, statins, etc. What we really need in terms of a big breakthrough as far as public health is concerned, getting a hold of the cancer itself. Because cancer is one of the key issues. If you have the cancer, you will have the major next victory in public health itself. So that is one of the key challenges that we're looking at. As I said, the cardiovascular disease, even in countries like Pakistan, India, they have been doing very well in terms of controlling this because they have dual burden of disease. They're still fighting with infectious, then now there's cardiovascular, and the third one will be the cancer itself. So we're going to see a lot of opportunity that is going through in these areas. So cancer screening is a big issue, and then oncology visits. I mean, they talk about like how COVID has actually decreased the overall rate of cancer screening, which is unfortunate, but at the end of the day, it is something that is a massive opportunity moving forward. One of the key issues is what? Early diagnosis. If you have to remember one thing, you have to remember early diagnosis. And the idea behind it is that if you have the tumor diagnosed early, it can go from localized to regional, then regional to distal metastatic disease. And if the mortality rate, right, the percentage of cancer deaths is going to be significantly higher if it's metastatic disease, right? No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So the question really is that how do we move the diagnosis backwards? How do we make it faster, better, easier, and more importantly, sometimes non-invasive? We're going to talk a lot more about what we call liquid biopsies in this thing. So we're going to see that more and more companies are looking at liquid biopsies, basically using a blood test in terms rather than imaging, because they are much better, easier, faster, and cheaper in terms of getting those, things. This is again a big, massive opportunity in terms of intellectual property, etc. If you can generate biomarkers, if you can get those biomarkers, and then as the cost of next generation sequences is going down, you can just simply do a blood test, and then you can get the diagnosis of a cancer much faster and easier. Molecular testing market segment is basically divided by into what he called the tumor burden. So again, there's a question of diagnostics, and then of course you have constant monitoring that dictates the therapeutics, right? So therefore, those things are still very important in terms of understanding our cancer, you know, life cycle. Like, God forbid that if you've got a cancer, how are you going to go through that, the whole process? So there's of course hereditary cancer testing we do. Most of them is related to breast cancers, and then people are getting even prophylactic mastectomies right now because of that. Then there's cancer screening. Cancer screening is very common in terms of doing colonoscopies, etc. So we are doing that. And then of course surgery and first line treatment, those who are able to identify it in patients, like God forbid if you have liver cancer, melanoma, etc. And then of course we have prognostics, and then this is the one, minimal residual testing or minimal residual disease if it's there. And then we're going to continue to do MDR testing for the rest of the time. For example, prostate cancer is one big example. You can get surgically removed and then, continue to test these people. And then, of course, these biomarkers like PSA have been debated, how useful they are, etc. Multiomics is powering screening tests for deadliest cancers. What do you mean by multiomics? Multiomics is basically that you are actually combining the DNA mutations. uh, alone are insufficient for most stage 1 cancers economically, because it's just a huge burden to get them. If you What you really want to do is, blood tests can improve lung cancer screening, but blood tests could lower the average cost of detecting lung cancer. So what is this whole thing? So here's the situation, right? What you're trying to do over here is that what I want to do as a physician is that, is there any way that I can not do CT lungs every 6 months, 9 months, because the quote unquote radiologist thought that this may be a node and this can become cancerous. So let's go ahead and repeat these testing. And this has a significant impact on compliance as well, because people can go for one time or two times, but generally speaking, it is hard for the patients to come and do those CAT scans. Even my dad, I mean, just simple cough and everything, we just ordered a CAT scan. He was very reluctant to go in there because, oh, what is the dye going to happen, etc., and all of that. And he has been a smoker, unfortunately, for part of his life. So I told him, hey, you need the CAT scan. So it is getting harder for patients, especially older patients, to consider this as an option. So therefore, making them go to imaging centers is harder. What you have to do is that there should be an easier way. It's just basically a blood test to screen for lung masses. Not that imaging is going to go away. That's where multimodal comes in. The multimodal means that you're combining imaging with genetic testing, and that is the holy grail. So you can do both, and once you can do both, you can bring the cost down of doing repetitive image testing, but you can increase the value of sensitivity and specificity of both the tests, because now you have both the situation in which that can happen. So what we're looking at these is multiomics. Basically, there's Cologuard, which is for colon cancer, so they can detect through the DNA if you're going to develop colon cancer or not. So again, these are areas where we're seeing that the liquid biopsy, liquid CT only, a liquid biopsy plus liquid biopsy, which is basically doing actual genomics on it, is actually improving the overall diagnosis of the cancers. And when we say liquid biopsy basically means that you are able to, within that blood test, you are actually sequencing everything and then figuring out if there are cancerous cells in there through DNA markers. So therefore, when you do just the liquid diagnosis and CT only, if you add the liquid biopsy component, you can increase the screening potential of those. And therefore, once the screening is again done, you can save a lot of money, because again, the cost is coming down, and that's the whole thing about technology. It's fundamentally deflationary. So what you're saying is that anything that I'm developing right now, as a matter of fact, through the economics of scale, through the economics of time, and I've talked about multiple videos, how the hardware costs are decreasing, software costs are decreasing. Overall, the amount of costs in both in terms of money and in terms of human resources required in an advancing technology gets cheaper and cheaper. Multi-cancer earlier detection, MECD tests are cancer moonshots. Again, they're calling it moonshots, and again, these are still moonshots. But again, if these are tests that are available, I would do that, right? I mean, I would take a $2,000 test out of my pocket that can say that, okay, they're going to screen for 1,000 cancers. Sure. Again, these are not effective. These are not something that is currently available in the market. But if it is available, even I would not care about my insurance, money, because I understand that the early diagnosis is so important. I mean, it's I mean, it's a bad thing to say, but to be honest with you, dying is much easy. Living with a chronic condition is much harder, especially situations like cancer when you have to take chemotherapy and radiation is very tough. And I see that in my practice. I'm a neurocritical care physician, so in my neuro ICU, a lot of brain masses are seen which are cancerous, and we are doing Ommaya reservoirs. We're doing direct chemotherapy injections within the meninges, etc. It is awful what people go through, and therefore, even the cost is $10,000. Believe it or not, I might actually consider it, because if there is one test that can detect 1,000 cancers, that would be great. Blood-based testing could revolutionize the treatment of early stage cancer. Absolutely. I mean, the minute you know that I have this cancer. And the early stage cancers can be much faster, easier, both in terms of surgical intervention, non-surgical intervention. And these days, of course, you can just go in neuro IR wise and coil the blood supply to the actual tumor, and you're done. So again, the way that the therapy is going to change is beautiful. But again, the question really is early diagnosis and blood testing, especially when you can take the whole blood sample and run it through massive gene sequencing to see if there's any kind of cancer, and then you can find that cancer and then appropriately do the imaging after that. It is going to be massive, massive in terms of our change in the therapeutics of cancer itself. um, and again, this is very important too. When you do have a cancer, how do you actually make sure that you do not have recurrence for it? So therefore, these MDR tests are going to be essential in detecting recurrence or relapse of cancers as well. So it's again very important that these things do come up. Again, according to them, it is very, very close, and therefore 2030 you're going to see a lot of companies building this. Again, I am not looking at this as an investor. I'm just teaching you as a general that, hey, if you're looking for oncology as a specialty, it is very exciting. However, neurology is still the best. So you can always take that with a grain of salt. But we are looking at therapy selection tests, and everything is improving significantly as we move along. And according to them, currently there's only a $5 billion opportunity. By 2030 they're going to be talking about 24 billion. However, the total addressable market only in US is 95 billion. And honestly, amount of tumor burden that is increasing, it is unfortunate, but we are living into an ecological nuisance, and we are seeing that a lot of cancer diagnosis. Not to mention, we are living longer and longer. When we are living in longer and longer, the chances of our DNA breaking down and causing cancer is also increasing. So therefore, it is something that most companies would be interested in, as far as going into as far as research potential or product potentials are concerned. Molecular oncological testing revenue should grow by 20% annually through 2030 and beyond. And I agree with that 100%, that we're going to see, as the next generation sequences are coming down in cost by itself, even some tests that are not that great, unfortunately, physicians are going to start ordering them, and we are going to start seeing that there will be an increased uptick of these tests. Again, right now, the data suggests that there's a lot of false positives, which overall increases the cost. But we're going to see how this pans out as far as innovative, disruptive technologies are concerned. In the next lecture, we're going to be talking about electrical vehicles. Please stay tuned.